leaving many salons unable to reopen, and some warning they could be forced out of business. Fiona McIntosh, the co-founder of the home beauty service Blow Limited, said the situation was hugely frustrating.
We still don't know when we're going to be able to do those services, which is having a huge impact on the freelancers who work for us. We have 250, women, freelance beauticians on our platform across London, Manchester and Birmingham who can't work, and they have been given no date on when they can work.
Lockdown restrictions are also easing in Scotland. Indoor shopping centres can reopen from today as long as customers wear face coverings, and visitors will be allowed back onto hospital wards. Pubs, restaurants and hairdressers will be allowed to open on Wednesday. South Africa's president has reintroduced a ban on the sale of alcohol as coronavirus infections continue to rise rapidly. Cyril Ramaphosa said he wanted to help the healthcare system by minimising hospital admissions. Andrew Harding reports from Johannesburg.
The alcohol ban has come back into force here with immediate effect, along with an overnight curfew. The abrupt move underlines quite how worried the authorities are about South Africa's health system being overwhelmed by the current surge of Covid-19 infections. There's no doubt that stopping the sale of alcohol will immediately ease pressure on hospitals, which routinely fill up with the victims of drunk driving and alcohol-fueled violence. But the government has sought to offset what it knows will be an unpopular ban with more lenient moves to open parks and limit other restrictions.
The Supreme Court will begin hearing a long-running equal pay case which could affect the wages of hundreds of thousands of supermarket workers. Asda is appealing a ruling that lower-paid shop staff, who are mostly women, can compare themselves with higher-paid warehouse workers, who are mostly men. If the appeal is rejected, it's estimated that the four biggest supermarkets, Asda, Sainsbury's, Tesco and Morrison's, could have to pay out up to £8 billion. The National Trust is reopening some of its historic houses. Lockdown is estimated to have cost the organisation about £200 million. Visitors who've made a booking will be allowed at 5 properties today in a test run of new rules intended to keep them and staff as safe as possible.
Thank you, Jane. It's now 6 minutes past 6. Let's go over to the BBC Weather Centre. Ben Rich is waiting for us there. Morning, Ben.
Good morning to you, Nick. Thank you very much indeed. Well, it's not looking like the brightest week that lies ahead of us. There is often going to be a lot of cloud around, and that cloud will produce some rain at times. Not an awful lot of rain, nothing desperately wet on the horizon. And equally, that cloud at times will be thin enough to break up and give a little bit of sunshine. And across the southeast of England, it's a bright and sunny start for most. But as we go through the day, we will see more cloud working in. I think it'll stay dry for most right through until the very end of the afternoon. Some rain will eventually arrive, but another warm day, highs of around 24 degrees. Now for southwest England, for the southern half of Wales, for the Midlands and for eastern England, these areas getting off to a largely dry start, but cloud amounts will increase very quickly this morning. We'll see some outbreaks of rain drifting southeastwards as we go on through the day. Temperatures generally between 17 and 22 degrees. Now for the northern half of Wales and for northern England, it is a cloudy and a damp start for most. Some outbreaks of rain at the moment, which will slide away southeastwards. So by this afternoon, it should be drier. It'll stay quite cloudy for most, although northeast England should see some sunshine. Temperatures of 17 to 20 degrees. For Northern Ireland and for Scotland, well, the most persistent rain has already cleared, but it is going to stay cloudy for most today. 1 or 2 showers, a lot of dry weather, and I think across eastern Scotland there's a decent chance of seeing some brightness. Temperatures here up to 20 degrees, more generally 14 to 18. Tonight staying rather cloudy, quite mild, with some rain in northern Scotland and in the southeast of England.
Thank you very much indeed, Ben. Let's take our first look now at the morning front pages. And it depends which paper you read, what you are reading this morning. The Metro, for example, leads on the headline that we're leading with this morning, Clear Up the Mask Model. It shows a photograph of Boris Johnson in a mask taken on Friday. Michael Gove on the television yesterday not wearing a mask at any stage. Mr Johnson at one stage suggesting that it might need to be compulsory to wear a mask. Mr Gove telling us this it will not. The front page of the Telegraph has a photograph of another man who's been reluctant to wear a mask. Trump's cover-up, it says, over a photograph of the president wearing a mask. Otherwise, Otherwise, it's EU news, Brexit news on the front pages. The FT reports what it calls a Johnson proposal for state aid, which it says will set the stage for Scotland and Wales. New rules on state aid, subsidies, in other words, companies will go down to national level, and the Johnson government, we're told, wants to take all those decisions in Westminster and not devolve them to Scotland or Wales. The Times focuses instead on the story that the Brexit era brings a rise in holiday insurance costs, whereas the Telegraph focuses on the new immigration rules. Migration crackdown to bar EU criminals, with Priti Patel set, it says, to announce later today that foreign criminals sentenced to more than a year in jail will be banned from Britain under those new immigration rules.
You might care to go inside the papers for the most interesting fare this morning, and there is quite a lot of it on the inside. Ian Birrell, writing in The Eye, talks about the dark side of the applauded NHS, and talking specifically about the mental care health system, which he says is failing and scandalous, and particularly the business of how care homes deal and how the NHS deals with people who have learning disabilities, and actually more generally with those who are inside the psychiatric system. The pandemic, Ian Birrell says, has exposed how social care is the forgotten public service in this country. In the Times, a piece about the BBC from Claire Foges, very, very positive about the BBC in some respects. I write this, she says, not as one of the BBC haters, and she talks about the extraordinary reach of the corporation in Britain and across the world, but she also says it often seems as if the BBC is an institution intent on committing suicide, and particularly she is upset by the idea that the BBC is not diverse enough. It says it's an obsession of the BBC, but actually the BBC is a more diverse organisation. She goes through the various figures than most in the UK. And Dominic Lawson writes an interesting piece in the Mail on the inside pages about crazy anti-vaxxers, as he puts it, that actually when we do get the vaccine, one of the big difficulties will be, put it bluntly, quite a lot of people just will refuse to have it. So he muses about the possibility of a mass vaccine take-up that is enforced by the government. He points out last year's Conservative Party conference, long before all of the COVID business came to haunt us, Matt Hancock, Health Secretary, floated the idea. I think there's a very strong argument for having compulsory vaccination for children, he said, when they go to school. Otherwise, they're putting other children at risk. And what Dominic Lawson suggests is they're going to need some pretty big guns, who are not necessarily medical big guns, but publicity big guns, to make sure that we do all take the vaccine. And he suggests Prince William as the person to spearhead it.
Time now is 11 minutes past 6 now. Not on our front pages, but certainly on the front pages in India is the news that 4 members of the best-known acting family, not just in India but on the planet, have caught coronavirus. They are Bollywood royalty. Let's talk to our correspondent in the home of Bollywood in Mumbai, Yogita Lamaya. Tell us more, Yogita.
Well, Nick, on Saturday, Amitabh Bachchan, Indian superstar, man who's worked in hundreds of films and has fans all over the world, he said that he put on Twitter, actually, that he tested positive for Covid-19 and that other members of his family were being tested as well. His son, Abhishek Bachchan, subsequently also put on, on the micro-messaging side that he tested positive as well. And yesterday, Abhishek Bachchan's wife, Aishwarya Rai, who's a very popular actress herself, and their daughter Aradhya, who's 8 years old, also tested positive for the virus. Amitabh Bachchan and his son Abhishek are in the Nanavati hospital in Mumbai. The last we've heard from the family is that they're experiencing mild symptoms. What we're being told is that they're in a respiratory isolation unit. Aishwarya Rai and her daughter Aradhya are sort of isolating at home.
This is not just a big story in its own right, but a symbol, really, isn't it, of the struggle that India is having with this disease.
Well, that's right, and particularly so because Amitabh Bachchan was the face of government coronavirus ads. He's the man we see when we turn on the television telling us about, all of the precautions we should take to not be infected by this virus. And so, obviously, Mumbai, the worst affected city in India in terms of deaths as far as the virus is concerned, it clearly shows that, even people who sort of know what precautions to take public could get infected by this virus. At the same time, I have to say that COVID-19, anyone who suffers from COVID-19 also suffers a huge stigma right now. And a very popular film actor like Amitabh Bachchan getting it, and, if he has mild symptoms and, is then released from hospital later, it could perhaps address the stigma that's associated with this infection in India.
Yukita Lamaya in Mumbai, thank you very much indeed. I once slept on the sofa in Amitabh Bachchan's office in Bollywood Justice. Long story. I'll tell you sometime.
I look forward to that. 13 minutes past 6 is the time. Both candidates in Poland's closest presidential election since the fall of communism more than 30 years ago have been claiming victory. Adam Easton is our correspondent in Warsaw. Is that still the case, Adam, or are we getting any nearer to an actual result?
Events have changed just in overnight. We've had a later exit poll which takes data from 90% of the polling stations, which gives President Duda, the socially conservative incumbent, a 2% win. He got 51% of the vote compared to the centre-right Mayor of Warsaw, Rafał Trzaskowski's 49%. Now, this is just still an exit poll. The official result will not be known until later today. We've got, with the coronavirus pandemic, obviously lots of votes to be counted in the UK and the United States, and Poles even holidaying in Europe. In Croatia were queuing overnight to try and vote. So it's not official yet, but the margin of error of that exit poll is just 1 percentage point. So with a 2 percentage point win, that looks like President Duda has been re-elected, which will be of some concern to Brussels and people in the European Union, which has criticised Mr. Duda and his support for the government's controversial changes to independent institutions. I'm thinking of the judiciary, but also the public media, which they say have undermined the rule of law. Now, if President Duda has won re-election, there are no the next general election in Poland is in 3 years' time. So the government has a free rein with a supportive president to continue some of those controversial reforms and those changes to the judiciary, which, as I say, has raised some concern in Brussels, and even there's now debate about linking EU funds. Poland is the largest recipient of EU funds under the current budget to rule of law issues.
Adam Easton in Warsaw, thank you.
It is now 16 minutes past 6. Each day brings a new list of businesses that can go back to work, but there are some who still don't know when they're going to be able to reopen. Here's Dominic with that and the rest of the morning's business news. Morning, Dom.
Yes, good morning, Nick. And remember, the furlough scheme starts to taper next month, which means that employers will have to pick up some of the wage bill for staff who aren't working or decide to let them go. One sector which doesn't yet know when it will reopen is events, trade shows, that kind of thing, which is, in the UK, a surprisingly big business. More on that in a minute. Also this morning, Centre Parks reopens today. We'll have a chat to its chief executive. And it's a big week for economic data this week to track the health of the economy as it emerges from the lockdown. We get official figures on jobs, wages, and GDP for May. First, the events companies who still don't know when they'll be able to go back to work. Simon Parker is from the show organiser Informa. He also speaks on behalf of the Association of Exhibition Organisers.
It's really frustrating for us, actually, because we have been having a really positive and constructive dialogue with government. And also, if you look at other geographies across the world, so Germany are already staging exhibitions, France have got a go date. It's a mystery as to why we haven't got a date. We desperately need a date. And the problem is that the longer we wait, we are looking at real risks to jobs and livelihoods.
The crunch time is coming right across the economy when the furlough scheme will start to taper. It will start to cost employers some serious money. How many people might you think are on furlough across the events industry in the UK and so at risk of being made redundant?
We think there is a real risk of 30,000 people losing their jobs, which for us is 60% of the supply chain. What you also have to remember is that the event industry also services the hospitality industry, hotels, bars, pubs. All of those sorts of things are going to suffer as a result of the fact that we're not running these shows.
Some of the larger ones, the ones I've been to, like World Travel Market or the big car shows or the defence event in the Docklands, they are mass events and they are crowds of people in quite narrow walkways. Can you control that? Can you genuinely say you can keep to social distancing at the very large events like that?
We actually design these from scratch, so we can actually design in all of those things. So we can design in monitoring contactless registration, we can deep clean the venues, we can restrict numbers, we can control density, visitor flows, all of those things. And we've actually devised a whole system of protocols that we've been working with the government on, actually, that I think absolutely gives them confidence and us confidence that we're running these events in a really safe and responsible way.
That was Simon Parker from Informa. Well, one company that will be reopening its doors this morning is Centre Parks. It's been closed for 4 months, but has its first guest this morning. Its chief executive is Martin Dalby. Martin, good morning. How will a trip to Centre Parks be different for visitors who are arriving today?
Yes, good morning. Of course, we're taking all the government guidance into hand, and we've got measures in place to make sure that everyone, including our staff and our guests, are completely safe and therefore still able to have a fantastic experience and a short break holiday. So for example, we're going to open with reduced occupancy. We feel it's better if we have fewer numbers there to be able to space out. Not forgetting we've got 400 acres of woodland, lots of open spaces, the great outdoors, lots of outdoor activities. So it is a really good place to come and feel safe during these difficult times. Obviously, operating social distancing, enhanced cleaning regimes, queuing systems. We've got changes to arrival and departure times, so you arrive a little bit later, you depart a bit earlier. That gives us more time to deep clean in the middle. Reduced activity programs, again, to aid social distancing. And then in terms of food, we've created a food delivery service to your lodge, so you don't need to actually interact with anyone if you don't feel comfortable. And we've gone cashless. We've taken all the money away. You now pay only by card or by contactless on your phone.
No swimming pools?
Swimming pools will be allowed to open in 2 weeks' time. Yes, 27th of July we open.
You talked about reduced occupancy. What occupancy rate do you intend to run at? Because Centre Parks famously tends to run about 90%.
We normally run about 95, 96%, so we're going to open at 65%. And then, we're going to take baby steps and see how it goes, and hopefully over the course of the summer and into the autumn, we'll be able to build up that occupancy as things, settle down.
Can you make money at 65%?
Yes, we can. We can make money, clearly not the same as what we would make at 95%. Our margins are going to be much more squeezed, as well as the enhanced cleaning, of course, is more costly, etc., etc. But we can still make enough money to keep ourselves, going, which is what's really important.
We spoke to the chief executive of Premier Inn, or Whitbread, the owner of Premier Inn, last week. They have an interesting idea that they're going to change out quite a lot of the bathroom stuff, in particular shower curtains, in between guests. Are you going to be doing something similar?
What we've done is we've removed all items from our lodges that are unnecessary. So, throws on the beds, any ornaments, fruit bowls, and anything that's not actually necessary. So that reduces the amount of cleaning we have to do and means we can focus then on the things that are really important. So we've changed completely our cleaning regime in the lodges and in central facilities to make sure it's the gold standard.
What will happen if you have a coronavirus case detected on one of your properties? Will you be expected to keep people there, i.e. contain it, or will you allow them to go home and then pass it on to track and trace? What's the plan?
Yeah, indeed. We've got testing in terms of temperature checks going into the swimming pool in 2 weeks' time, so we'll certainly be able to spot anyone who's perhaps got a fever. In that situation, they'll be sent back to their accommodation. We have an on-site medical team at each of our parks. They will then get a visit from the medical team, and the advice potentially will be to pack up and, without sort of coming into any contact with anyone, pack up and go back home to self-isolate.
I think you had about most of your staff on furlough. What are you doing about the whole furlough situation? Are you able to bring everybody back? And do you intend to take advantage of the furlough bonus, the £1,000 per staff member that the government is offering?
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, we had over 9,000 employees on the furlough scheme at the peak of this, which is a huge amount of people, of course. But I have to say that the furlough scheme has really saved the industry in that respect. It's been a complete lifeline. We've now got about 75% of our employees back in the business. We had another 2,000 come back last week. So for opening today, we're running at about 75%. And then through the course of, rest of July into August and September, we'll bring back the full workforce. So by the end of September, we should have everyone back in business. And yes, in terms of the employee bonus scheme, we certainly do intend to take advantage of that. Yeah, indeed.
Thank you very much. Martin Dalby, Chief Executive of Centre Parks in the UK. My market guest this morning is Simon French from Panmure Gordon. Simon, it's an interesting point that this coming week will be the point where companies who do have staff on furlough will have to make a decision about whether they take advantage of the furlough scheme or the tapered furlough scheme and keep them on their books, or make the tough decision to let them go.
Morning, Dominic. Yes, I think as we go through the summer and we start to see a tapering increase in the amount that employers have to contribute, and then eventually their scheme rolls off, we will unfortunately see more and more of these redundancy announcements. But it will be staged based on, I think there's a delicate balance for most business leaders of understanding how much volumes footfall will increase and at what rate, and there will be a delicate trade-off at the same speed as which government is withdrawing its support for the economy.
And it ends completely in October?
At the end of October, yes. And I think one of the things we do need to be mindful in trying to understand government policy here is that later in the year there will be both a spending review and probably a budget in November. I think it is still an open question as to whether the government might need to come back with more support for the jobs market over and above the job retention bonus that is expected at the end of January, if the level of redundancies as these stages come through is too significant, at least for the Treasury to cope with.
Well, we have a chance this week to take something of a snapshot of the health of the economy. We get numbers on jobs, so employment, wages, how much people are being paid, but also on GDP. We get the May GDP numbers. What are we expecting them to show the general health of the economy?
Well, the economic data at the moment needs to be interpreted quite closely, because we will get a record increase in the monthly output data from April, which was a very, very weak, an all-time record decline of 20% month on month. We will see a bounce back, probably the order of around 5%, which in itself is a positive record. But we need to calibrate that against the fact that year on year it will be down something of the order of 15 to 20%, which is a very, very deep contraction in the second quarter. But what I think is will be really interesting is economists have had to look at alternative data sources over recent weeks, Google mobility trends data, power generation data, some of the surveys that have been stood up by the Office of National Statistics to try and understand how the economy is doing. This will be one of those calibrations, getting the official data out, the monthly information, to get a sense whether those have been good indicators or poor indicators.
Well, those are the indicators that Andy Haldane, the chief economist at the Bank of England, was talking about when he suggested there was good evidence for the V-shaped recovery, the quick rebound.
I'm not in agreement with Andy Haldane that we are seeing a V-shaped recovery. Having said that, definitions of what a V actually looks like do vary between economists. But I would say that you are looking at an improvement versus some of the really lowballed expectations from both the Bank of England and from the Office of Budget Responsibility, who we hear from tomorrow about their updated forecasts and scenarios. And it hasn't been as bad, I have to say, as those scenarios were painted. And maybe Andy Haldane, having benchmarked against a very bad second quarter outcome, is showing some optimism that things haven't been as deep as the bank feared.
Thank you very much. Simon French from Panmure Gordon.
And thank you, Dom. It is now 27 minutes past 6. It is time for the sports news with Carthy, and there was no miracle in Southampton yesterday, sadly, Carthy.
Unfortunately not, but it was a fascinating final day of the first test between England and West Indies. As Nick mentioned there, England lost an excellent 95 from Jermaine Blackwood, helping West Indies to a 4-wicket win. England's stand-in captain Ben Stokes admitted that they were not ruthless enough in this test, but he enjoyed the experience despite the defeat.
I've loved this week, the whole week building up to being captain for the first time. Obviously it comes with its stresses, which I found last night. I had a pretty restless night last night, but the other 4 were actually, pretty easy. It's not easy, but found myself getting to sleep quite well. But look, I'm really looking forward to welcoming Joe back into the squad. It's been really great to be able to take over the reins, but this is Joe's team.
The West Indies captain Jason Holder was pleased with his team's performance, particularly given the unusual circumstances.
Really, really happy. The boys have worked hard leading up to this first test match. To just see your hard work pay off.